On the first night the cable sang, Mara thought it was the wind. The ship, an ungainly maintenance vessel called the Caroline Gray, rolled in a messy swell over the mid-Atlantic ridge while the crew smoked and pretended not to be afraid of the dark. Below them, an internet artery ran mute along the seabed. That line, glass threads fatter than a child's wrist bundled inside armor, carried gossip and banking and wars and jokes. It was a leash around continents, and for 2 days the Gray had been pacing it, trying to find the wound. Mara was the acoustic specialist. 26 days aboard, hair tied back in a knot that got tighter each hour, she wore old headphones and listened to the ship's throat through the hull. She listened for teeth. At 0113, something under the water plucked the cable like a string. A single, impossible note rose through the steel of the ship and buzzed the fillings in her back. Molars. She sat up in the sound shack as the signal rolled through their instruments and kept going. Toward the horizon. Toward everywhere. Seismic? Asked Tomasz, the ROV pilot, leaning in the door with a mug of something too sweet. He always smelled faintly of solder. Not that frequency, Mara said, scanning the waterfall of the spectrogram. The note was pure, too pure for geology. It was a line knifing upward out of the noise, then leveling into a steady living tone. In the mess, Captain Ellis, who had 2 text messages from a child on shore saved in an ancient flip phone, lifted, an eyebrow at the timestamp. "What's the diagnosis, Dr. Ears?" Mara exhaled. "The cable's under tension. Extreme. Something tugged it, or something attached." "Attached?" The captain's weathered face tried to smile. It ended as a grimace. "A trawler snag. We've seen it." "Not like this," Mara said. They marked the coordinates and waited for dawn. The ocean does not care about clocks, but men do. They ate eggs that tasted like heat and fatigue. Tomasz checked the ROV's thruster screws 3 times, as if they might have unscrewed themselves out of spite. By the time the light came, a hesitant strip of pewter between bruised clouds, the note had faded. The ship felt lighter, as if a stranger had departed. They launched the ROV, a yellow cage bristling with lights, cameras, and a manipulator that always looked like it was trying to remember what hands were for. The cable lay in a narrow valley of elephant skin basalt, dusted with white plankton snow. It had been scraped, abraded, like something had combed it with metal claws. Now and then it twitched. The machine followed the line, spooling out fiber, like entrails. They reached the breach at 3,000 meters. A fisheye bubble of glass fused to the polymer jacket, warped and cooled into shapes like frozen breath. Beyond it, the cable sagged into a crack. It was not a break in the armor. It was a mouth. A slit in the seabed that had not been on any map or sonar readout last week. As the ROV's lights touched its seam, the cameras snowed static. Just for a second, and then the picture cleared to show nothing but dark. "Seafloor creep," Ellis said too quickly. "Subduction adjustments." "We're not near a plate boundary," Mara said, but quietly. She kept replaying the frozen frame that the static had made, a row of tiny points like teeth, but she knew it was just sensor noise. Knew, and did not believe. They tried to pull the cable clear with the manipulator. The finger locked around it, and for a breath Mara felt the tension through her own bones, through her own tendons, a loop between the ship and something below. "Stop," she said. "Let it rest." The ROV's thrusters shuddered, squirming against the deep. The manipulator let go. The cable lay down again with something that sounded like relief. When they winched the ROV back at dusk, everyone watched. The water. The sun got stuck in a band of cloud and turned the Atlantic into a skin of hammered lead. One of the deckhands, a quiet kid from Cadiz, crossed himself once, quick, like he was swatting a fly. That night the note returned. This time it pulsed. On off, with regularity. Mara fed the pattern to a script she had written out of boredom. It spit back nonsense. She fed it again. Nonsense. She changed parameters like a gambler, moving cards. When the script finally returned something that was not nonsense, she wished it were. "Hello." That was what the crude compression had produced, stitched out of frequency shifts like a voice pulling its mouth into shape. Her shoulders prickled. She knew it was a coincidence, like seeing a face in a cliff, but the cold feeling didn't leave. The note pulsed on. She stripped the code back and fed the raw sequence to a simple idiot Morse parser just to insult her own fear. It came back. Hello, she called Ellis and Tomasz. They stood in the cramped shack and listened to something in the water say hello over and over in a ways that could be argued with and also could not. Marine mammals can mimic patterns, Tomasz said, or somebody's bored with a shipboard comms rig. Below 20 hertz? Mara asked. The note was so low she felt it more than heard it, like a hand on the sternum. Ellis rubbed his jaw. He did not call shore. That was the strangest thing. The captain of a ship alone with a problem is a rare animal, one that wants an opening, to declare itself. But he stared at the blinking LEDs and the cracked plastic of the desk edge and said, "We reply." How? Tomasz asked. The cable, Ellis said. Mara looked at him because of course they could. The cable, no one thought of it as a string you could pluck. But that's what it was, all wires are that in their secret bones. They could attach a small current and change its tension and thus its voice. It was insane. It was marvelous. It was stupid. Ellis shrugged, a slow roll of shoulders. We'll whisper. The suits won't hear. I want to know if it's a trawler with a hacker, or just the sea looking funny in the moonlight. Mara set the parameters so the current would be nothing more than a sigh from a dying battery. She translated letters into a stepped pattern of micro-tension shifts the cable would carry like a rumor. She felt like a child cupping her hands to talk through string and tin cans. When she hit enter, the ship itself seemed to lean forward. Hello, she sent. The reply came almost before she stopped transmitting. It vibrated through the hull, through her bones, almost through the soft part of her eyes. Hello, hello, hello. Cute, Tomasz said, forced. Parrot, Mara typed without consulting the men beside her. Who are you this time? The reply came in a long, unbroken tone that flattened the room, that made the loose screws sigh against their threads. The spectrogram turned into a white plate. The ship creaked as if a taller wave had arrived. When it released, the message unfolded, like a cramp easing. Home, Mara swallowed. That's not a name. It is if you have nowhere else, Ellis said. He sounded like a man in a confessional. Something shuffled on deck, a foot. The quiet kid stood in the doorway with his eyes like sea glass. The cable is singing to the water, he said. His accent folded the words into something gentler and more ominous. It makes the fish come. Mara found him later, smoking beside a coil of line. He made a small box in the air with his fingers. When my grandfather was a child, he said, they had a radio. Sometimes at night it would pick up stations that were not there. Not even stations. Just men breathing. The rustle of clothes. You could hear the room they sat in. He said it was because the radio was tired. It was old and the wires were loose. Wires don't get tired, Mara said, but she was kind. In the galley light, the kid looked like he needed a superstition more than he needed truth. He nodded anyway and blew smoke toward the bow. The cable is picking up something that is not for us, he said. We should say sorry. They didn't. They sent, who are you again and again until the sea taught them how sorry was spelled. The first body floated up the second morning. Not a body. Not a human. It was a fish the size of Mara's torso. A sunfish, swimming wrong with its fin like a flapping flag. It had run itself ragged, pushing against the hull until finally it tilted and slid down the side into the ship's shadow. When they got the hook on it and dragged it aboard, there was a ring of pale tissue around its jawline like a brown wedding band. When Mara touched it with the back of her finger, it pulsed. Not muscle, not life. A vibration. She snatched her hand away. Tomasz swore. Off the boat. They heaved the fish overboard. It sank like a stone, as if the ocean had taken back one of its fingers. That afternoon, jellyfish arrived, not in a navy, in a thought. They drifted past like ideas of jellyfish, A few at first, and then more until the water had a gelatin glare. The deck scuffed with a film when the mist hardened and fell. Mara's lips tasted of copper. It was beautiful if she half closed her eyes. If she imagined she had never seen the sea before, she could have loved it. At 1807, the note changed. Home became something longer, a paragraph. The micro-tension pulses lined up into something that hinted at grammar. Come, come, come. Come rolled down the cable like iron beads. The message made everyone who heard it take one step toward the rail before they realized they were moving. The deck tilted. The sea was tilting. The world was a cup, and the cup wanted to pour into the crack on the bottom. Ellis shut down the transmitter. We're getting the ROV out again, he said. We'll cut the line if we have to. Cut the internet? Tomasz said, weakly trying for humor. Sir, the children will riot. We'll splice it after, Ellis said. We'll report a decline and a delay. Shore can argue over forms. They launched at night because there was no choice. The deck lights carved a circle of moth white around the bay. The ROV slid into the water like the ship was feeding it to a mouth. The tether unspooled too easily. Mara watched the depth numbers climb, the pressure clamp down. The cameras flared with plankton like snow in headlights. Then the snow became streaks as the vehicles fell faster than thrusters wanted, as if gravity here had been given a private instruction. At 2,500 meters, the signal returned without them sending. The cable hummed a word that was not a word, a mumbled syllable like a person trying to teach themselves to talk for the first time. Mara. She stared at the display as the letters lit, staggered from noise. The neck of her shirt felt suddenly too tight. It's a coincidence, she said to no one. It is inserting sequence that approximate. Mara, come home, come, cut the feed, Ellis said. We need the picture to cut the cable, Tomasz answered. His hands trembled on the joysticks, but the vehicle obeyed because machines are loyal in a way that men cannot be. At 3,000 meters, the ROV's lights found the cable again. Its jacket rubbed down to inner fibers. Its body sprung, like a tendon pulled rank by a heavy load. There was the crack in the seabed with its edges not rocky but soft, glistening a lip. A halo of particles drifted around it, going out and then in, as if a giant were breathing. The cable had dipped into that lip and was being eaten not with teeth but with time, broken down like bread in a mouth. Manipulator out, Tomasz whispered. The arm unfolded. The claw did not close. It hovered as if it had been reminded that it, too, was made for grasping the way a throat is made for, swallowing. Why is it not? Ellis started, and then the ROV turned its camera all by itself and looked into the crack. For a moment the monitor showed not water but rooms. A warble of images like the way the sea shows clouds in its skin. You know how sometimes glass holds a reflection of a world you cannot see unless you squint? It was like that. The images floated, overlaying the basalt in layers. A woman in a kitchen that wasn't this year. A dock under a fog that had never existed. A conference room with chairs around a table and someone humming. A hospital bed in an empty ward, sheets folded too neat. A boy holding a phone up at arm's length to take a picture, his mouth an O of surprise that kept opening. Then the camera drifted closer and the images resolved into a texture. They were not elsewhere. They were here and pressed flat. They were moments crushed into a skin, a film that moved when the breath moved. Back us out, Ellis said. Tomasz tried. The thrusters spooled. The tether twitched. The vehicle did not move. The manipulator arm curled into itself, a little, laugh of metal. Mara said the cable, nothing else, over and over like a heartbeat that had learned her name. Speak to it, Ellis said. For Christ's sake, speak. Mara put her hands flat on the console like she was about to pray. What are you? She whispered, not typing. The microphones were off. There were no microphones to hear her anyway. There was no direct path from her mouth to a mile of water. Still, she said it, and the cable shivered. Home. Where is home? She asked, not expecting an answer, and the note changed, became a chord. The spectrogram sprouted branches like frost. Under, it's learning, Tomasz breathed. It is not just matching patterns, it is building them. He sounded almost worshipful, afraid in the way of a parishioner who has seen a statue bleed. Cut the cable, Ellis said, but his voice was a stranger. Signal the arm to cut. Tomasz sent the order. The manipulator unfolded again, no longer uncertain. It set the cable across a notch in its own elbow like placing a string on a bridge. For a heartbeat, the three of them could hear every conversation the wire carried, 1,000 voices collapsing into one plain word for now. Then the arm convulsed, and the cable did not cut. The arm broke. It snapped at the elbow like a forearm, and the vehicle jerked. Something pulled on the tether from below, a slow, patient tug like a mother leading a child. The ROV drifted into the crack with all its lights still blazing and disappeared as if the ocean were a sheet, and someone under it had smoothed a wrinkle. Silence. Except for the cable. The cable gurgled. The cable breathed. They reeled nothing, back but a frayed end of tether that wept water. Ellis put his palm on the line and shut his eyes. "We're leaving," he said. "We're leaving right now." They put storm covers on the winches. They turned the bow toward the west. The engine sounded like fear. But home is an old word. It knows patience. It knows your weight in the dark and how to unbutton you. The swell rose into a chop, then into a gait, then into a run. Sleet slashed the deck lights. The crew chased lines that chased them back. One man went down and got up missing half a thumbnail. The quiet kid from Cadiz prayed where no one could see him. The captain stood at the helm and thought, not about orders or insurance or court. He thought about his daughter's 2 messages and how the battery on the old flip phone was almost dead. He wanted to write back and say, "I am sorry for not knowing what counts." But there was no time for letters. There is never time for letters on board a ship that is being pulled by its throat. "Mara." Ellis again in the sound shack. "It wants you." "It wants anyone," Mara said, but she did not believe it. The line saying her name felt like a finger tracing her ribs, counting, deciding which one would crack first. She took off the headphones because they were not stopping the sound from getting in. "I will go to the bow," Ellis said. "We will cut it from the ship." "You can't," Tomasz said. "That's not how it's secured." "Then we'll cut the ship," Ellis said, and it was not a joke. "We will cut her free of this." Wind hammered the shack. The glass moaned in its beating. The deck outside turned from slick to wet to something that moved of its own accord, a layer of clear jelly under their boots. It began to creep up the bulkheads in webs. The door stuck when Mara tried it. The hinge screamed. They fought there, way along the port side. The cable entered the ship through a guarded fairlead, thick as a thigh where it came over the roller, flexing slightly, warmed by the life inside it. It was making a sound you would have to call purring if you were not ready to be honest. Ellis brought a saw as if you could correct a spell with a blade. He set the teeth to the metal guide. Sparks fell and hissed away in the moving wet. He worked a groove. The ship shivered, its spine stiffening under the assault. The cable hummed. The jelly that had crept up the bulkhead found the blade and toyed with it the way tongues toy with needles. Ellis did not stop. He made men's noises, the oath when the teeth caught and barked their knuckles, the grunt for leverage, the old word that means do not when the sea rose up bigger than an apartment, building and tilted its face at them and tried to speak through it. Mara stepped toward the cable. She is not sure why. Later, in the knife slice of moments she had left for remembering, she would think, "I thought if I touched it I could teach it to say a different word." She put her hand on it like a person trying to soothe a horse. It was warm. It was warm in a way that meant blood. "Don't," Tomasz said, but softly because he had already reached out with his own mind and put his ear to the line in a way no one could see. "Mara," said the cable. Not begging, naming. "What's under?" she asked. "What is under?" The winter sky tore. Lightning walked around the horizon, bored and theatrical. In the flicker, the water ahead of the bow rose and then did not fall. It bulged. You know how a carpet bulges when something rolls under it? The sea did that. A long, slow wave without a crest slid toward them. It was not breaking because there was nothing above it to break into. It was all inside, all mass, all wanting. Ellis, good man, tired man, made his decision. He dropped the saw. He put both hands on the cable beside Mara's and leaned in like a person at a lover's doorway. "We hear you," he said into the steel. "We hear you." The note shifted. Every man on deck, every person inside with their eyes squeezed shut, felt it shift. The jelly on the bulkheads stopped moving. It trembled. It thinned. "Keep talking," Tomasz said. He had tears in the corners of his eyes that he would tell no one about. "Captain, talk." "What do I say?" Ellis asked, and Mara, who had never prayed, said, "Tell it who you are." He cleared his throat. "I am Ellis. My daughter is 9. She likes kites shaped like dragons and tomatoes with salt. I drove a car into the ocean when I was 19 because I thought that was funny. My father loved a woman who was not my mother. I keep a bottle under the sink and promise to pour it out every Sunday. I am good at trigonometry. I am bad at quiet. I am afraid that I have wasted half my life on the wrong things. The cable hummed again, and this time the word it made was not home or Mara. It was a sound like an intake of breath made into music. It was what a person makes when you open a door and they are standing there, surprised and delighted. "Ellis," it said. Or something exactly like that and nothing like that. The bulge in the water slowed. It pressed itself flat and then spread out around the hull. The ship rose 2 meters without pitching. The lights went dim and then bright. The jelly evaporated from the walls like a rain that had decided it had been impolite. "Keep talking," Mara said, even though every hair on her body wanted to stand up and run. Ellis did. He told the cable the travel times of kites. How long it takes for a kite string to hum when you run. He told it secrets men tell their first children and no one else. The gray drifted. The engines idled. The storm took off its coat and stood in the corner pretending it was not watching. And for a while, a small while, the ship was a house and the ocean was a yard. Then Tomasz, who had been staring at the fair lead and the place where the cable met the ship, said in a voice that had no top, "It is growing." At the mouth of the guide, where the cable's sheath met the roller, there was now a bulge. Not soft like jelly, not hard like steel. The sheath had swelled. Something inside it was pushing. The yellow guard paint flaked in curls. The bulge throbbed. Under Mara's hand, the cable's warmth was now heat, and the vibration had picked up a second tone, a harmony a half step off. "Back," Ellis said, loving and stern at the same time. They stepped away together. The cable pulsed again, and the bulge split along a seam that had never been there. A length of inner fiber slid out, wet and pale and moving. It was not cable, fiber. It was something like tendon, something like gristle, something that had learned the shape of both wire and vein and found itself beautiful. It wriggled in the air like a thing remembering how to be in gravity. At its end, a human tooth, perfectly rooted in nothing. Mara didn't scream because it would have been vulgar. Tomasz did not because he had stopped breathing. Ellis did, not because he had once been 19 and driven a car into the sea for a joke. The tendon reached toward Mara with the neutrally curious air of a snake. She stepped back. It followed. The cable hummed a new word. Hunger. "Leave the ship," Ellis said, and he said it to the sea. "Leave the ship alone." He lifted the saw again, absurd and holy, and brought its teeth down on the tendon. No sparks this time. The blade caught. The tendon writhed. It made a squeal that turned Mara's bones wet. The tooth grated along the steel, chipping. The captain leaned his weight. The tendon tore. Translucent goop blew into the wind and came back as tiny crystals on their cheeks. The rest of the cable pulsed. Once, twice, as if startled. Then everything stopped. The note cut out. Not a fade. An abrupt unplugging. The ship suddenly felt too light, like their bodies had been held and then let go. The tendon on the deck lay still. After a moment, it began to dry. It turned from pearly to gray, and then to ash. The tooth clicked once on the steel, a small embarrassed sound, and broke in half on its own. They stood there with their mouths open like fish that had been told a joke. Someone on the starboard rail vomited neatly, and then apologized to no one. "Go," Ellis said afterward quietly. We go now." He lowered the saw as if some part of him had grown fond of it. They went. The storm slunk away to find angrier men. The gray's wake trailed behind in a straight line like a single thought. The cable, freed or sated, made no more music. 3 days later, in a harbor that smelled like crushed lemons, a team in clean shoes came aboard with clipboards and anodized briefcases and faces recited from a handbook. They asked whether anyone had drunk, whether anyone had taken illicit substances, whether anyone had suffered head trauma previously. They wrote down mechanical malfunction. So many times the word turned into a sketch. They inspected the fare lead and asked how old the saw was. They logged the loss of the ROV as a training incident. In private, one of them, an older woman, with the eyes of someone who had once loved a dog very much, asked Mara, "What did you hear?" Mara answered honestly. "Home," she said, "under, Ellis, and at the end, hunger." The woman nodded once like a citizen hearing an anthem. "We thought so," she said. She did not elaborate. No one told them whether to feel fortunate or damned. Ellis went ashore without signing. He took the flip phone out of his pocket like a relic and found a kiosk and bought a charger that did not fit. Mara watched him through the window of the mess as he stood there with a cashier, trying to mime shapes of technology that had become historical. He looked like a man trying to describe a song he had only dreamed. That night, in an unlovely hotel, with a carpet pattern that hurt the eyes, Mara lay awake and listened to the wall outlets, to the distant hums of compressors, to the private lives of pipes. The world, she realized, is a cable. The world is a million cables. Each line carries voices and heat and forgiveness and need. And under all of it, there is a place that has never forgotten what it means to be a throat. She dreamed of rooms, not haunted house rooms, but rooms that had been loved. Her mother's kitchen with the dented pot, a lab with a coffee stain on the grommet mat, a bunk with a view of nothing but a gray rectangle. She dreamed them pressing slowly against a flexible skin, flattening gently until they were pictures like the ones she had seen in the crack. In the dream, she put her hand out and the skin met it, warm, humming. "Mara," it said, not from the wall, from her chest, where the heart is a fist. "Come home." She woke with her palm braced against the headboard and her mouth full of salt. Inyoan, the first light. She went to the bathroom and wrote a single word on the mirror with the edge of her credit card, scraping a path through steam that had not yet fogged the glass. She wrote no, because she did not know what else could stand against home. At the dock the next day, a boy sold t-shirts with seagulls on them. He held one out to her and said in a voice still learning English, "My cousin says a ship came in, with a voice in its engine. He says when you stand near you can hear your mother saying your name. Is funny." Mara bought the shirt because it seemed terrible to take his inventory. She put it in her duffel without folding it. She stood in the sun and listened. The gulls, the forklifts, the men whistling tunelessly, the cable drums turning, everything a conversation, and underneath, a bass line so low you could call it imagination, or weather, or the earth remembering to spin. In her pocket, her phone vibrated. She looked at it expecting words that would be ordinary and wonderful. "Are you back? How was it? Will you come for dinner?" Instead, there was a notification that made no sense. Roaming. Charges may apply. She stared at it until she laughed. "You'll have to pay," she told the air, and felt foolish and did not feel foolish. A week later, the Caroline Gray took on a new ROV and a fresh crew. Tomasz stayed, because he could not think what else to do. Ellis stayed because any road away from the sea felt cruel. Mara stayed, because fear is a kind of gravity you can learn to surf if you practice. They went back out along the same line, because the world is a loop in a list, They ran the cameras and checked the plows and replaced the fairlead roller. The sea gave them ordinary days, freckles of sun, rain like rice, a squid that rose to look and then dropped in offended silence. The cable made the familiar tiny noises of electrons and friction. The ship floated, badly and bravely. On the third night, Mara woke to a thin, steady tone that she felt in her teeth. She walked to the sound shack in bare feet. The screen stared back wintry and complex. The spectrogram was a forest of noise. She sat. She put the headphones on and then took them off because they did not matter. She laid her palm on the metal plate, bolted to the console. "Hello," said the cable, cheerful, infinite, patient. Mara looked at the clock. The numbers were ordinary. The world was ordinary. The water was black and old. She closed her eyes and answered with her hand on the steel, on the artery that threaded continents. "Hello," she said. "Tell me about home." And far below, something opened its mouth, unfastening the darker dark, and began to try.